may have joined us from far away. My name is Erika Calderón. I work for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA, and I will be with you today as moderator of this webinar regarding biosecurity assessment. We will have excellent panelists today that will share their experiences in the subject matter. I would just like to remind you that this webinar is interagency. It's an interagency coordination. We are part of the GIFSTAT together with WOA, FAO, CARIBET, CAPSA, OIRSA, COPEC, USDA, CVP, LACAN, among others. And of course, under the coordination of IICA. Among all agencies, we have been sharing with these webinars with you. This is a training initiative. We have been sharing information on prevention and response to emergencies related to African swine fever and other transboundary diseases. So without further ado, I would just like to remind you that this is a webinar. There will be two presentations today, three, today. And at the end, we will have time for questions and answers and comments. So please write down your questions in the Q&A section or even in the chat section. Today, there will be three presentations: biosecurity management as a tool for disease control and epidemiological monitoring, and then the experience of Chile, biosecurity and control of ASF and other transboundary diseases, how to reduce risks, as well as the experience of Mexico. This webinar is being broadcast, streamed on social media, both in Spanish as well as in English, and in French and Portuguese. So, we would like to invite you to join us to share these webinars. As I said before, we have been working on this for over 2 years now, and all this information can be found on a platform that was developed as a result of this initiative and holds all the information and the webinars we have been celebrating. So throughout the webinar, we will remind you of the link to connect to this platform. So without further ado, let us begin with the first presentation by Dr. Carlos Piñeiro. A brief summary of his CV. He is a veterinary from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. He has a PhD from Meiji, Tokyo, as well as a diploma from the European College of Porcine Health Management, and is has a veterinary program from the University of Madrid. He is also a member of the Spanish Focus Group for Digitalization and Big Data for the agriculture and livestock sector of Spain. He is also a member of the board of directors of this ANAPORC Association, and also coordinates content from the working group for the specific training in digital skills from the Organización Colegial Veterinaria. For the last 25 years, he has been Director General of Animal Data Analytics. He is an expert in health, biosafety, and livestock production data analysis and management. He is director of 36 different applied research projects at a national and international levels, 42 publications in 42 index publications, and he has written 8 chapters and specialized books related to production, animal health, and environment. And he is a notable collaborator and web pages. So with his broad experience by Dr. Piñeiro, I leave you. And and something else I forgot to remind you of. Please write down in the chat what country you come from, what sector, public, private, academia, you come from, so that we can keep a record of all agencies and institutions that are with us today. So, Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you. Well, thank you, Erica. The truth is, I thought that you were going to give a summary just of my curriculum, but wow, that took a long time. But the important thing here is that for everyone to understand that we have been working in the subject matter for quite some time now. I am very happy to be able to share with you regarding biosafety. We have so much in common here. I have some other new things I would like to share with you based on solutions that have already worked. So for a group of like this, it is of great interest to share this information with you.
Well, I
will try to focus on very practical matters. A group like this to talk about biosecurity, I'm sure you know much more than I do, because this is, I imagine, the main concern of all professionals in this sector worldwide. Due to the significant economic losses, this means we could be way beyond $20 billion a year in losses because of the sanitary emergencies that have created throughout the world. And it is important to remember that there are many objectives in our countries which are being affected here. Basically, we see the difference in the use of antibiotics. One matter that appears continuously is the African swine fever, because we already have it or it is nearby, but there are others. We should not forget that this is all a package. We have a pathogenicity also that appears in different countries in the world, in Asia and Africa, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a series of projects underway, like biosecurity and biosecure, excuse me, and we are developing a study on the status of this in Europe and see what best options appear. This was published a few months ago in the media, and it shows a very high percentage of the disease outbreaks have four main factors, all of which have to do with movement of vehicles, of individuals, and of animals. Now, focusing on the African swine fever, this continues to be a threat. It is currently in Europe and Asia. Fortunately, there have been no further outbreaks in other countries, more than the one in the Dominican Republic. And basically, we are very happy for this. So we are focusing on the most important factors, very well known to all of you, and the human factor, as we will see later. These are the ones of greatest weight, and this is related to the habits that we have with moving animals. This is also, when we talk about biosafety, well, we want to ensure that if the disease does come, it should not affect other farms, particularly those interconnected. So we will focus on we want to ensure that this does not affect other farms. I already mentioned all the collaborating agencies. WOA has been very active in all of this. We must respect all the efforts that have been done by the different organizations. We we must ensure that, for example, the animals are remain in isolation. One, however, is very important. We have to monitor this continuous surveillance and report if we see something suspicious of the different types of sanitary surveillance that exist aside from classic. And we uh, believe in this syndrome, basically surveillance, report this as quick as possible. If that symptom is due to vomiting or fever or hemorrhage, this is detected by the person that is with the animals day by day. This is very important to relate it to the symptom. My professors have always told us that reaction time is very critical. The faster you can react, the better. In biosafety, in biosecurity, in production and reproduction, we have protocols, well-established metrics, and we have a very strong human component in all of this, psychological components. Notice this gentleman here. He uh, he is examining the wheels on the truck, the tires, but he does not understand the same perception of the disease, and then it could give him the impression that he is doing something that is safe, and that is not the case. Sometimes it is out of because we do not know or we do not understand the local language or the lack of experience, and generally, in we really do not have significant metrics that will help us with this. This is a photograph I took some time ago. It says, "Stop, no, do not come in. You too, owner." So sometimes the owners feel they have a different profile. I am the owner, so I do not need to meet all those requirements. And we see biosecurity publications mostly focus on human factors. Notice this. This publication is very interesting. It relates to the detection dynamics, the way we learn in biosecurity. There are very interesting elements here. The low levels of biosecurity made it be an unpredictable disease, and late reactions could lead to significant problems. Now, the good thing is that in all this challenge we have here, particularly with biosecurity, is that we have a new asset that appears in the farms and in the industry. Data, significant amounts of data. Very good quality generally. These could come from the farm themselves, from the treatment or mortality data, and could be turned into information that can be used for us to act in a different manner. Also very relevant in this case is that, well, this is uh, this was this was developed by Vaillancourt, very well known to all of us. So the question was, how can we assure we comply with biosecurity? Sometimes we feel that, well, let us see what they say. No, of course we have to continue doing what we were doing before, in the possibility of training people, continuous monitoring, surveys, etc., etc. That has to continue. And as to audits, we need to continue working on the farms, no doubt. Cameras could be of great use, but he favored objective data centers, data that could support all of the above, because otherwise we would be left behind. You can see here the thumbs up. This is showing where we have integrated technology for biosecurity reasons. So, and here I would like to share my own experiences to work on biosecurity. We do the classic things that need to be done, knowledge and things that have been done for quite some time and that work well. Yes, we need surveys. Of course, we love to use biorisk people or biocheck is our favorite one. Others are very important also and very good also. Biocheck is standardized and it is very suitable for many things. Secondly, we have to work on the farm, obviously, training the workers there. So far, so good. Nothing new, nothing special. But then what we are adding is one more layer, a layer of objective data controlling the movement of persons as well as vehicles and the sanitary observations related thereto. And in this case, this is the differentiating factor. Okay, these are the different steps. Let me go back here a moment. When we combine technology and human factors, that is when we can carry out this biosecurity digital control of operations. The world is also moving in that direction. Now we have ways of developing a reliable digital record of people, of visitors that come to the farm, all digital. This ensures full traceability of visits and to monitor outbreaks. If there is an outbreak on a farm, I have traceability in a matter of seconds to develop parameters, to develop automatic alerts. That is also very important. And that the farm staff who is there every day with minimum training can say, hey, listen, I have an animal with a breathing disease or with hemorrhage or whatever. These are very simple applications, and the people on the farm then can record what is appropriate. First, we verify, excuse me, that audio, the audio of that video was interrupting the speaker. The world is going in that direction. We bring those close to our sector, particularly with the people that are there. With this, then, what we do is precisely that. Here we see we have to measure what we can measure and what we cannot. Well, we make it measurable. That is what we try to do with biosecurity and to a good measure with animal health. I know I am speaking as Spain, etc., etc. But in our company, and as to what I have to do personally, we are fortunate to see many realities of swine farming. There are backyard farms, some that are very technified, and this we must bear in mind when we offer a solution, as is the case of these images here. And we can address all these things that come up. What I am presenting here is not just for people with very sophisticated farms and professional systems, extraordinary connectivity. By no means, no. If we had thought of it that way, it would have been a big mistake. What have we done? Tried to cover a world that does not exist. When I go to a farm, normally I come across something like this. In the best of cases, a visitor book that I have to sign. I come from XY company. This was my last contact, and I sign. Now, for traceability on the farm itself, for us to match logbooks from the different farms, logbooks of visitors, it is not a nightmare, but it is very hard work. So this system is very simple. What we do is collect this all digitally, both from individuals as well as vehicles with a QR code. You will see we assign a QR code to the person, and the person writes down on a register sheet, and that is perfectly well recorded there. The second thing we do is specify the standards, the rules in the farm. We could give some general rules if they do not have them, but the company or the institution can apply whichever. When you have been to exposed plant, you have to spend 2 days basically locked up before you go to another farm. What have you? These are just examples. And with this quality and quantity data and rules in the system, we prevent undesired visitors. We monitor the operation and predict risks, and we will see examples of each of these. The visitor could be authorized if they meet the standards. If they are not authorized, in this case, we confirm with the person, or the user says he cannot enter I'm sorry, visitor, you cannot come in. The system has all this information, and there is a warning. In some cases in Europe, we are using this extensively. Aside from the QR code, we use these GPSs, very small. They're just like a bar of soap, a GPS on the vehicle. And in that case, you no longer need the QR code. We import the data with the permit of the owner or the company, etc., and only with the QR code or the GPSs or combination of both. So far, we have seen that the combination is best. But if we had to work only with QR, that can be done. I will show you in a video what the system is like on family farms or more isolated farms. I will show you a brief video.
Accepts or rejects the visit according to biosecurity criteria accepted by the farm. Person nearby, immediate alerts, and real-time surveillance. Biosecurity and health surveillance effectively and in real time. As you see, with a very simple system, it's possible to control visits and have a classic logbook. You could even print it out, like the one on screen to the left. But if you see the lesions, and it's very well organized for every lot, every visit. It can be queried by the company supervisor or whoever at the same time. So with just an entry, we see many things. In this case, a logbook for this farm is on your cell phone, of course, wherever it may be saved, but you can also print it out. For this company, you see who came in, which people, which vehicles, whom it may be, and you say, well, I have too many visits, or at least I have this number of visits, and then the system will tell you you had too many this day, or there was a bad visit today. That's why it's alerting there. It's an alert right there at the moment of the visit, but then also logged overall. Then also you can see how operations are going overall. So one of the companies, for example, here lets us show very visual graphs, who's doing what, if everything is going fine, and if you have done what you say you were to do. This is also for different genetics farms or areas for cleanup. We also have reports where you can look at it as a veterinarian. So if you say, I have an outbreak in this farm, whatever disease it may be, it could be an endemic or epidemic disease, I immediately, in seconds, can see all the visits in the past 7 days, the direct contacts in the farm, and indirect contacts. So contacts of contacts with all the detail I may need. So as a technical director, as a veterinarian or a person responsible for this, as I've received an alert or I have an a serious suspicion, even if the lab has not confirmed, I can say, well, for sample taking, we will do this, take precaution for that. Let's close a ring around this area. I'm showing you some screenshots, but just to let you see how long it takes. It's just choosing a farm for any company, a group of companies, a region. So you have a disease here in this farm, whatever disease, and then it tells you these are the visits in the past week with these many direct and indirect contacts, and then you can, it's really fast. And it also allows me that when you have any biosecurity faults, and this is actually surprising because many companies easily have 20 to 30% of non-compliance with their own standards and protocols. These faults are not homogeneous in the sense that every person does this or a vehicle does this. They tend to be concentrated in a few individuals or vehicles because, as I said, it may be young people or it may be people that are not informed enough or they're afraid of something. So here you can see, well, there's a concentration of these vehicles or these individuals are giving us more problems, so we'll work with them. It's a very visual system. You can have timelines to see what farms have problems and which ones don't. There's heat maps as well that are very widely used, and you see where there are more non-compliance issues. Green is fine and amber is acceptable. And as I was saying, the system does not just avoid a visit, it prevents, but it also monitors, which is also great. But additionally, we also add epidemiological science and data because when an epidemiologist, and some of you probably are, if you have good quality data every day in almost real time or real time, you can have these types of graphs. And there you see of all the farms in one area, say 100, 500, 5,000, how many farms they are. You can look at the number of contacts, positive or negative, the distance they have from one from another. We're also adding metadata, meteorological data, with uh, also different geographical data, if there's a forest nearby, and that helps us improve the model. Actually, this afternoon, right before I connected, we received a new publication. It's in minor revision, and hopefully with a couple of tweaks, we can publish it. Here we are explaining and showing the system we propose with a different type of approach, very interactive, to look at the super disseminators, at those super spreader farms that are at highest risk. So with that, I am closing. The messages, the takeaways are really easily understood. Biosecurity can be enhanced with information and communication technologies. We can use them easily. And this is not like it's the greatest new idea. No, this is a proven technology. It has been used in Europe and Latin America in different scenarios. We have some companies and
Algo
institutions that use
importante
it.
es que no
Also
decimos en
importantly,
el campo puro de
we
la
are not
consultoría, ingeniería
uh,
informática, etcétera.
consultants
Conocemos la granja
or
y
just
sabemos que
process
para que algo
engineers. We are
funcione
people that
tiene que
know
ser
the farms. We've
sencillo,
been
tiene que
there,
ser
and we know
robusto y
that for
tiene que
this to
estar
work, it has to be
en
simple,
este caso
robust, and well
desarrollado. Y
done.
además
In
podemos
this case, it's
efectivamente actuar o modificar según las
our own
necesidades del
development, so we
sitio.
can even
Conocemos el
adapt it
sector,
to
no
each
solo porque
site's
conozcamos la granja,
needs.
sino porque
We know the
conocemos el
sector,
entorno,
not just
conocemos la
because we know the
legislación.
farms, we know
Estamos muy
the language, we
acostumbrados a
know the
la consultoría a trabajar con
regulations.
instituciones
Fortunately, we
comunitarias,
are
Ministerio de
used to working
Agricultura,
with institutions within
etcétera, y
Spain, the
también
Ministry of
con Bruselas,
Agriculture, etc.,
sabiendo que
but
este
also
tipo
with
de cuestiones
Brussels and
son las que
others,
están afectando
understanding that these
la
types
regulación
of
que además cada
issues
vez exige más,
go
¿no? Porque
through
es el requisito a
regulations
tratar
that
con una
are more
enfermedad.
and more
Y
stringent
además
for
todos sabemos que
recording
esto
and
suena muy
traceability.
bien, pero
And
muchas
we
veces
also
el
know that
uso
this
no
might
está muy bien y
sound
es tan
great, but
sencillo yo como para ejecutarlo
sometimes
igual.
people say I have enough stuff
No
to
lo voy a
do to have
posicionar
something
en el
else on top
sentido
of
de
it.
que
But we're also careful about that.
acompañamos a las personas,
We
a
are
las
sure to
empresas,
support
para
the
que eso
companies, to
aterrice bien,
accompany
que
them,
se
to
implemente en
work
esa
with the
cultura de
businesses so
trabajo,
that they
en esas
implement this as
condiciones
a
de
working
producción, en ese
culture
estado
in
sanitario,
their
para
production
no generar un
conditions and,
problema más, sino
and
para todo
a
lo
health,
contrario, ¿no? Para
sanitary
acompañarles
health
y
state,
todo
so
eso pues
that
vaya
they
aterrizando
understand that it's
como se
just
debe.
something that supports them and
Y
it
luego
is
además es
truly
que, bueno,
used.
una de las
And also, one of
características de
the
la
biggest
experimentación y del
advantages of
instituto
digitalization
es
is
que es
that
atractiva, o
it's
sea,
very
es
cost
que esa
effective,
en
it's
cuanto
very
a
attractive in that sense.
todos los beneficios derivados de decir,
All
pues
the
mira, detecto
benefits
algo,
that you can
evito la
see,
extensión,
there's
las
rapid
personas al
detection, you
final están
avoid
controlando las
spreading,
vigilancias sanitarias
you really have a
o
good
sanitarias
network
también en
of
defensa de ello,
sanitary
de tal
surveillance
manera
in
que mejoran
real
mucho
time
el
or
bienestar y
semi-real
nosotros
time.
tampoco
So it
venimos
will
a
improve
hacer esto
everything you
porque lo
have.
decimos por decir
Again,
en España
we're
patas
not
arriba, nada,
here
sino que
to
lo que hacemos
to
es entendemos
bring
que
everything
ese tipo de
upside
trabajo
down,
pues
as we
es
say.
un
We
plus
understand
que
that you
puede
work in a certain way,
contribuir a
and
que
this
un
can
poco por
be
aquí,
a
asegurar un poco la
supplement
banda,
to this.
trabajar con
Just
las
change a little bit
personas
here, a little bit
y
there,
hacer
working with some
esas
training, but
implementaciones
it's
muy
not going to turn
sencillas, muy
their whole
rápidas y desde
operation
luego
around. It's
muy
very easy, it's
satisfactorias. Y
very
se ve la
fast,
cantidad de
and
cosas
it is
que se
satisfactory.
podemos
We
hacer
see
con este
so
tipo
many
de
things have
argumentos.
happened. You might
Por eso
imagine just by
decimos
seeing the
la
presentation, but
necesidad
for
de hacer
us,
cosas
it
que
was
para saber si
surprising to
estábamos
see
ciegos
how many
y
things we
utilizar la
were
vigilancia
blind to
sanitaria y
before
avanzar.
in
Así que
terms
esta
of
experimentación
sanitary
pues
surveillance.
ha
And
sido
now we are not
lo
blind.
mayor podido
Hopefully,
explicar
with this, I
hasta
have
ahora de qué
explained a
opciones
bit
nuevas
more
tenemos
of
en
new
este
options
consulto y
that we
tanto
have in this
trabajando para la
context.
empresa como para
And
las instituciones,
uh,
como es su
with
caso, y normalmente
institutions
con ambas
and
al tiempo,
businesses, how
porque
to
desde mi
work
punto
with
de
them,
vista no se debe
and normally
trabajar
with
solo con
both,
una
because
coordinando a la otra,
we always
sino
have to
también
work with
metiendo a la
all of
academia,
them, not
a los
forgetting
docentes
either, and
cuando
also
podamos y
including
la mejor
academia
forma
when
de
necessary. It's the
trabajar.
best way to
Así que bueno,
ensure
pues
we all
con
work together.
esto quedo a su disposición para
With that, I am
las
open
cuestiones
to any
que puedan
questions.
tener y como digo, pues
And as
espero
I said,
haber
I hope
explicado adecuadamente todas estas
I
cuestiones tan novedosas. Muchas
explained
gracias.
this very well. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Piñeiro. Very interesting to see how many alternatives we have. That's the idea with this webinar also. For those that were with us in the past webinar, this is just continuing with that one. This is continuing on with the topic of biosecurity, which we believe is fundamental for preventing cross-border disease. That's why we wanted to add a second webinar on that same topic in terms of measurement, tools, alternatives, and how other countries have had experiences and in their own biosecurity programs. So again, this is an alternative that seems to be quite user-friendly, and hopefully countries may find it useful. there's a series of options, and just to know that with a simple thing we can improve and control biosecurity. Thank you so much, Dr. Piñeiro. We will wait for the question and answer session later on. Always a reminder, add your country and institution in the chat box. We've had people from Guyana, Argentina, Colombia, the National University there, and we also have Dr. Veronica from WOA. For those asking if presentations will be made available, they will. As part of the webinar, we will be sending you a link to the platform where you will find all the webinars, all the presentations, and all the materials. Continuing on, we now have a second presentation. We will hear from the experience in Chile, biosecurity and control of ASF and other transboundary diseases, and how to reduce risks. For that, we will have Dr. Álvaro González, who is a veterinarian in Chile since 1992, holds a master's degree in veterinary and livestock farming with a mention in preventive medicine from the University of Chile. He is currently working in epidemiology and disease control in the Agriculture and Farming Service as an analyst of bird diseases. He's also worked as local official veterinarian in the eradication of different diseases in Chile. He's regional responsible veterinarian for animal health, and he has been head of epidemiology in the Agriculture Service. He's also a technician in eradicating Newcastle disease, preventing avian influenza, and controlling salmonella since 2015, and Porcolombia and eradication of common swine fever since 2013. Associate professor of Santo Tomas University, collaborator in FAO in control and eradication of CSF in Bolivia, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and others. With that, Dr. González, I give you the floor. You can share your presentation. We can barely hear you. Please speak up. Is this better? That's better, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. When I was contacted and saw my fellow panelists, I thought, wow, I'm actually the one that will be learning from them, not the expert. I'd like to share what we do in terms of biosecurity and controlling ASF and other diseases with a more general overview, not so specific, given that my work and our work in our agriculture service is actually led by Dr. Patricio Perez, another colleague present here in participants. He's the one in charge of swine. But given my experience in Colombia and FAO, I really thank you for inviting me. The idea is to just give an overview, open it up for questions, and see what's interesting about how Chile approaches the prevention of ASF and other diseases. The first thing when I was asked to talk about risk, that we would have to see what is risk and how to define it and how we see it in Chile. Risk is contingency or proximity of damages, and also for WOA, it's the likelihood of noxious incident happening for the health of people or animals, and the potential magnitude and biological and economic consequences. So we're talking about likelihood, and so of course there's no such thing as zero risk. But then also in this glossary in the chapter on risk assessment, you have the danger or the hazard, which is the biological, chemical, or physical agent or an animal, a product that can lead to these adverse effects. In that sense, our agricultural livestock service looks at different agents that could be a risk for our zoosanitary conditions, and we do a risk assessment where ASF is part of that. From the standpoint of ASF, Newcastle disease or avian influenza, our service in the past years has been in an alert stage, starting from FAO's timeline. We use this constantly in our work. We are in a state of alert because there is ASF already in the Americas and Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And from the standpoint of risk is if it's spreading to other countries in our continent of the Americas. So it is our task to also include avian influenza, Newcastle, ASF, and other important diseases that could affect our livestock. From the standpoint of decreasing risk, which is what Dr. Erika and Dr. Peña requested I analyze, is how we work in risk reduction. So I wanted to show three levels: the regional level, national, and then farm level. At a regional level, I have to say there's been wonderful work of the Permanent Veterinarian Committee of the Southern Cone since 2004 when it was formed. And this is always having working groups to address disease prevention and control in the sub-region, including Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile. So that's how this group, this committee, the CVP of the Southern Cone, which is shown on screen, we have an avian health group, food safety group, and then there's also a pork health group. And I will be talking about this group led by Patricio, as I said. They've been preparing for several years now, different activities, seminars, training, workshops to help prevent ASF, and at the same time, these models to share it with other universities. For example, this is for Argentina, in Senasa, and also with the creation of a regional strategy to provide surveillance and control of ASF and CSF. And thinking, if you remember, in Brazil, they're one of the main exporters, if not the largest exporter of pork meat. Chile is the third, and there's great potential for growth. So that led us to really look at transporter diseases, not just in each country, but regionally. That's why we have a regional strategy to reduce risks. This includes preparing prevention and control of ASF, and part of the most important actions is to reinforce biosecurity. This is looked at different countries. We started in 2020 by implementing measures to avoid ASF entering our countries as much as possible. We might remember there was a case in Brazil many years ago, and when we talk about Dominican Republic, then it's a reintroduction of a virus that we had in the Americas many years before. And if it does enter, to avoid its spread to domestic pork or wild pork or wild swine species, and also industrial swine. All this information is available on the website of the regional group. It includes identifying threats, having effective collaboration among countries to ensure communication of any risks if the disease is detected, promoting collaboration and compliance of these measures, and involving stakeholders of government, industry, academia, all coming together to better understand how the disease may be spread to the countries or within each country. We should also highlight that there's different levels of action. There's a prevention plan with lines of action to avoid ASF entering the region. This includes looking at contact, spread, and entry, and preventing it. And here we can talk about essential measures taken taken in terms of biosecurity in each of the farms. And there's a series of activities here in each country, in their own regulations, and also in risk communication. As we've heard in this webinar, and we heard from Dr. Piñeiro, it's important to ensure that there's no residues of or soil feeds in family farms, in also in Brazil and Argentina and Chile. There's been a lot of work in that, how to communicate risks to ensure there's more biosecurity in each of the farms and industrial companies, how to avoid entry of the disease, and also communicate this to the public in general so that they wouldn't visit anywhere. We don't necessarily include surveillance for example, educational farms, but we're starting to do that. And also those holding other types of swine meat for consumption. Chile is also working on or linked to work with different agencies internationally. In Chile, we have agreements with ICA, with FAO. We work very closely with WOA. There's also a strong relationship with the Andean community and Panaptosa, and also importantly, agencies and also the ones that help coordinate this type of webinar are important to prevent ASF and its spread throughout Latin America. They're fundamental. So we really thank ICA for the work, and also from our country in Chile, we're also encouraging you to continue working in the types of work and education that can help us improve diagnosis, surveillance, and others. So to close this first part of the regional level, with my presentation, I want to raise some questions to see what we can discuss and just think about it over time. These are things we always analyze at our service. We have no zero risk, that does not exist, and there's not enough preparation in any point. But is there a clarity in each of the regions of the Americas, North America, Central America, CARICOM, CVP, how the spread of the disease could happen in your areas? And since ASF reappeared in the Americas, have regions reduced the risk of its spread at an adequate level of protection? So are countries really prepared to avoid the disease entering their territories? And the third discussion question when preparing this is there in each region, do we have the necessary technical teams for biosecurity? Do we have regional strategies that have been prepared and communicated in each of our subregions? I don't have the answers. In our case, the experience we have through our regional committee is what I've shown. At national level, I wanted to share an experience not from the Americas, but something we're working very closely with in a similar logic, and it's the experience in New Zealand. If you have not visited this webpage, I strongly urge you to visit their Biosecurity 2025 webpage. New Zealand has established that biosecurity is a country topic, as it's important for all of them, people, organizations, Maoris who are their original or native peoples, different local, different levels of governments, to ensure that biosecurity leads to more resilient systems to protect their livelihoods and to avoid any disease and pests in New Zealand. So it's interesting to see what they've done in New Zealand. We've been working with them and the experience they have with avian influenza. When you involve the community overall, you can progress in communicating sanitary events of interest. So all New Zealanders are part of the biosecurity system, and they try to protect their lifestyles, their livelihoods, economy, and in their particular case, their very unique environment. They have a declaration on biosecurity saying that this belongs to all New Zealanders, and there's a guide for this system up until 2025 and further on, trying to take care of the environment, the economy, culture, and their social aspects. This is closely linked to One Health as well. We're starting to work in that sense in our continent, for example. This has implications at the global, national, regional, and local level. This is an example at when all come together to work, everyone geared at biosecurity to protect your health, your phytosanitary, and all types of heritage, you can really achieve a good sanitary status. Looking at national efforts, first of all, we have a regulatory framework in Chile. This has also been developed in Argentina with porcine biosafety and security. We have different work by ICA, there's work in Honduras, and training at national level to prevent these types of diseases. In Chile, we also have biosecurity regulations. They've been updated and they were published last year. And our webpage, you can look at our official systems for livestock farms and for backyard production. Patricia presented this a few weeks back in another webinar. There's also studies in different universities, and especially biosecurity, as we heard by Dr. Pinheiro, should not just be a standard or a regulation, but we have to constantly measure it to ensure the status and progress in different farms. This is an example of a master's thesis. It was a study in a specific region working with pork and poultry, and it was located at backyard production, especially for swine and own consumption birds. This type of information is taken from our veterinary service as relevant in terms of risk factors, and that leads us to produce better surveillance systems. This master thesis by Dr. Rees in 2003 looks at another study that swine have contact with wild birds, which can be important in terms of zoonosis. There's 28% that has contact also with neighboring animals. This is important for endemic diseases, and it can be fundamental for the territory. Few contacts with visits and not much quarantine for animals. And if we link that to neighboring farms, we see how important it is to train producers groups.
At a national level, it is important to have border control. There are different controls at borders. We have exceeded 50,000 examinations in 2023. We work very hard on illegal trafficking, particularly of exotic animals. This we see has been growing over the years, and it is important to have these confiscations at the different borders. This is the first barrier to entry, or the first barrier a country could have to prevent the entry of pests and diseases of exotic nature. Another important point that Chile has worked on very hard is animal traceability. This is done. Each farmer could have a system like this. They keep records of the farm, a unique number is assigned to the farm. They have to declare the existence of animals on the farm at least once a year. And in the case of swine, well, this record is kept by type of animal, males, young piglet, females, what have you. All these records are kept nationally. Something else worth highlighting about Chile and that we have recommended other countries to do is that the farm record, all you have to do is have a pig, one chicken, and that basically must be recorded. And that allows us to have a broader coverage of information throughout the country through the Agriculture Service official records. Something else that has been developed in this area, and this is in participation with a private partnership, is that we monitor transactions at cattle fairs. When the disease appears, we immediately have information about that, and we have basically records of all the plants, the processing plants, and they have all the clinical reports of possible different diseases, and there are records in real time, which helps with epidemiological decision making. We also have this for the backyard poultry. Also, we have this for swine, so that is part of our work for prevention purposes. Now, another very important point at a national level are the prevention and contingency plans that need to be developed. These prevention plans date back to 2020, when we started developing the African swine fever prevention plan. Something important in our country is continuity of technical sanitary policies. Basically, this does not undergo changes from one administration to another, but continues in one straight line, improving continuously. This original plan contained information on avoiding the entry through a panel of experts. Basically, we had advisors, and we adjust the plans if needed, and we assess the work done. We strengthen early detection. The emergency system. We work on zoning also. As an exporting country, our economy depends on the export of animals, and so zoning is very important. And obviously, we work significantly on risk communication with the industry. We have communication campaigns at the airports, funded by the industry, to avoid the illegal entry of meats that could have African swine fever and other diseases. And we have developed different contingency plans. Here we can highlight some for foot and mouth disease, the avian influenza, and all these different things that could have a significant impact on our country. Something else we work on, and this is not just an example of Chile. Basically, we work with the guilds, the associations, like they do in Colombia when they worked on that in 2021 through 2023 for the eradication of avian influenza. We work with the poultry associations. Basically, we work informing passengers at airports. And another example is Port Colombia with the different training. Brazil has worked very hard with different guilds also, focusing on the prevention, and they are working on the eradication of ASF in the northern zone. And another important group, and this is within the framework of SENASA, they have worked very hard in Argentina to avoid the entry of African swine fever. As at a national level, and perhaps for a question and answer period later, for example, is there enough control at the borders to avoid the spread of ASF in my country? Well, is everything we're doing, is that enough, or are we missing something? Are there national recommendations or regulations related to biosecurity in my country? We could have a perfect regulatory framework, but if we do not have the knowledge on the biosecurity at the different farms, well, we would be working blindly. in the region, are there sufficient technical teams to trained in biosecurity, or do we have to develop a national strategy for that? Are there records kept at the farms? Well, remember that the first thing when we detect an outbreak, we have to detect the points of origin and the points of dissemination also to ensure there is no spread. We must focus on the prevention of entry of ASF, not only through information, but through financing also for activities that the veterinary service perhaps does not have enough funds for. So we have to work with the different sectors in all of this. And lastly, we have the identification of risk factors at the farm level. Each veterinary must really understand the points of the possible entry of these diseases, the ingredients in the feed, and we must control swill, and this must all be verified. Sometimes the grain imported basically stops at different ports along the way and perhaps fills up and can get contaminated. So as professionals at the farm, we must really see the traceability of the feed that comes for our animals. There's presence of wild boars near our farms. Is there presence of wild animals that could have this disease and pass this on to our animals? Are there backyard activities where the swine are fed with swill? We obviously must understand that 3-kilometer or 10-kilometer radius to know who our neighbors are, how they feed their pigs. And there are other vectors like ticks, and there are studies, national studies, that allow us to say that these vectors are in our country. The origin of pigs, is it well known, or do we have no idea of where the pigs came from? Are there domestic animals in our production? In industrial productions, we see dogs and cats, for example. Cats have been spreading tuberculosis. So whether there was a case in Chile several years ago, well, cats, they should be, they come to the farm and spend the day at the farm, and then at 4 p.m. they go out to the dairy farm and drink milk from the cows. So these are things we must keep records of. Is there sufficient pest control? Have we been able to detect all of that? Are we in compliance with all the biosecurity regulations? Do we have the contingency plans in our country? And in biosecurity, this is another relevant point. Despite the existing standards and rules the state has, we know that from the results of Patricio Perez and Pedro Patricia Piz, that the infrastructure in Chile is good, it is enough, but there are still areas of improvement. And this means that people must have their own biosecurity manuals to continuously assess compliance. Basically, we must see how the different farms are working. Is there disinfection in the holding sites, for example, and on the farms? We must have cleaning and disinfection activities. Are there measures against climate change that will allow us to have optimal production? And lastly, we must measure biosecurity, as Dr. Piñeiro said, not only at the country level, but individually, particularly if we have several units like this in the territory. Well, the farm contingency plans. It may sound strange, but each country must, each plant must have a contingency plan. What is around me? What are the industrial plants? What are where are the backyard areas? This is all information used to minimize risk. And an example of this study on biosecurity is that, for example, the backyard slaughterhouses usually sell to the neighbors as well as poultry. And in this plan, this work plan on biosafety, we have to ensure how to certify my animals. How will I dispose of these animals? How will we repopulate? And how can I go about the adequate research? Basically, in the event of nearby outbreaks, what actions will we take? And lastly, training and planning on our farms requires. Are our collaborators aware of the symptoms of the disease in pork and swine, bovines, in poultry? And we must have a strong team. Are they aware of how to react in the event of an emergency? Do they have the telephone numbers? And final questions is, do I know who my neighbors are? If not, well, we must start with this type of contact. Do I clearly understand the ingredients in the feed given to my swine? Is my biosecurity level appropriate? Does it bring peace of mind? Do I clearly understand the ASF and the class and the CSF? I must understand all of this. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Dr. Gonzalez. A very good presentation, very thorough. This gives us a very good overview of everything we need, and that is not just related to biosecurity or work at the official sector or at the level of the private sector. This is joint work that must be done. So thank you very much. Let us wait. Please write down your questions in the chat so that we can include these in the list of questions we will have in the final section. Now, thank you very much, Dr. Gonzalez, and let us continue with the next presentation. Basically, the experience in Mexico also in the subject matter, and we will hear Dr. Carlos Javier Alcázar, a brief bio of his. He is a veterinary doctor, zootechnician from the Autonomous University of Veracruzana. He took a master's in neurology from the Veracruz University. He has more than 12 years of experience and has growing responsibilities in animal health in the region. He has been working on the epidemiological surveillance system for exotic diseases in Mexico and is responsible for supervision and implementation of sanitary strategies for the detection, control, and eradication of exotic diseases like avian influenza and the training and forming of state groups to respond to outbreaks of exotic disease and emerging diseases or animal diseases in order to protect the stock in the country. Ever since he entered Senasica, he has been coordinator of the CPA zone, and after that is head of the Field Operations Department. He is currently subdirector of the operating liaison between the U.S.-Mexico Commission for the Prevention of Foot and Mouth Diseases and other exotic animal diseases. He is responsible for the epidemiological surveillance system in the field to detect exotic pest or diseases, emerging and re-emerging diseases in animals, and currently is coordinating the field activities on the southern border of Mexico for the implementation of the National Animal Health Emergency Device to prevent the entry of the border Mexico. This broad experience, I leave you with Dr. Carlos Alcázar. Go ahead.
Hola, muy buenos días.
Hello, good morning.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning.
Erika, ¿me puedes comentar si ya está
Could you
listo?
tell me if you can see the screen? Yes, perfectly well. Thank you.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias. Bueno,
Thank you.
pues nuevamente buenos días a
Once
todos.
again,
En
good
esta
morning,
ocasión
everyone.
vamos a comentar
On
un
this
poco
occasion, we will
en
talk about the Mexican
la
experience
bioseguridad en cerdos.
and biosecurity in swine.
Un poco sobre
Allow me to briefly
los
refer
conceptos de
to some
bioseguridad
biosecurity
que
concepts
la
that WOA
define a la bioseguridad
has
como un
defined
enfoque
biosecurity as a strategic approach,
tendiente a una salud, al concepto de una salud,
focusing on the One Health
como
approach,
una
and is defined as an integrated strategic approach to analyze and manage risks relevant to life in human, animal, and plant health,
así como riesgos
as well as risks associated to the environment. In other words, biosecurity has to do with the security of life. This is a very broad concept. However, we in animal health focus it on this way to reduce risk. Basically, we have a series of sanitary and zoosanitary actions aimed at the risk, minimizing the risk of introduction, transmission, and dissemination of pests or diseases. So we have this biosecurity program where all the staff at a swine farm, for example, must be aware of the importance of complying with biosecurity standards that have been developed by the company or by the country. So, allow me to mention that in order to be effective, the biosecurity plan must be based on good production practices. And part of a successful program means having a series of strategic points and determine how these will be evaluated and controlled to keep them under control. It is not just establishing a biosecurity program. No, the important part is that we continuously verify it through the responsible staff. There are a series of factors that influence the correct implementation of biosecurity program, and among these, we list here some common sense. Oftentimes, when we enforce a biosecurity program, if we do not have this common sense, if the person is really not aware of what he or she will be doing, well, it could lead to problems. And this, we're not talking only about the person in charge of the biosecurity program. No, all workers are very important. They must all fully be convinced also. Biosecurity is something that is convenient to us, the owners of the companies, and everyone, because this represents profits and greater production for protein. For the workers, it is important for them to keep their jobs. This is also very important, obviously. We must ensure that all production units have a good level of biosecurity through supervision, everyone will benefit from a biosecurity program. The biosecurity program has to have records, certifications, and there must be discipline and responsibility of the people that are with the animals day by day. And this cannot be done if we do not have a good training program. The people involved in the farm, be these workers or veterinarians, must be trained on the implementation of the appropriate measures. And I was mentioned a moment ago, this has to be supervised at all times. And something very important here is that biosecurity should not be considered an emerging measure. No, there are different agents that could affect the swine production, and that if biosecurity is not applied correctly, we will not be successful. That is why we need permanent measures. For the last few years, we have seen in the news that there is the African swine fever and how when it entered into the continent, and this put all the swine growers on alert. Remember, this is not an emerging measure. It must be permanent. So a biosecurity management program must be based on 4 main points: to prevent the entry of and spread of pathogens. Infrastructure is very important. By infrastructure, we mean something that allows the correct implementation of biosecurity measures. Not necessarily are we talking about the latest generation facilities. No, they must be functional to prevent the entry of these diseases. Okay, ingress control and entry control of visitors and individuals. Dr. Carlos mentioned that earlier. We have to keep records of who enters and who exits the facilities, internal movement within the facilities. There are so many diseases, and so we need to have control at all times to avoid harming the production unit. And the other important control, obviously, is the exit control. We have the entry control and the exit control. If we have a problem, we must be able to share it with the people that have been on in the facilities. As to the biosecurity levels, we have to see what level we are at as producers, as country. What prevails the most in the area? There are different levels of biosecurity where there are pathogen-free animals. We have the production of animals that they must not be subject to any pathogen, and there are different forms. There are farms that are highly technified with high levels of biosecurity. And then we see how the level of biosecurity begins to drop and drop until as we see in many countries, that we have about 25% of backyard production. And we have estimated this, as I said, at 25%. We can certainly find production units that are very rustic also, in enclosures, and the animals are fed with feed coming from the region itself. So that will also determine the level of risk we may be facing. I would just like to comment how these agents, infectocontagious agents, can enter into the property. We know very well which these are, the persons, ill animals, and there's a very important role, as I say, all the persons that enter the property. We have to keep very good control of this to avoid an outbreak of any disease, not just African swine fever, and this will result in considerable economic losses. There will be ill families, vehicles, feed, the wild fauna. It is important to consider all of this, like in the case of avian influenza. There are very serious effects. We have the different diseases that basically have to do with spreading the virus through wild fauna. So these are some of the mechanisms we have seen. Now, talking about Mexico itself, what is the legal support to deal with these cases? We have the federal law on animal health that establishes and enforces biosecurity measures. Currently in Mexico, we really do not have a zoosanitary campaign that forces growers to continuously comply with biosecurity. They do not need to carry official records. In other cases, we do have an agreement that does force the poultry growers, for example, to comply with certain biosecurity measures. This is verified by the official sector, by the government sector. This does not mean to say that we do not have biosecurity on swine farms, but there is really nothing that exists to show that if we do make any changes, we need to have this certification showing evidently that the farm has been inspected. The minimum biosecurity measure certification for the health authorities. This is upon request of the interested party. Our growers request this certification, and we go to the farm to verify that biosecurity is being implemented. There is a good practice manual that is used as reference for certification purposes. This is basically Senacica is the one in charge of this. This is a good agricultural practices, and this is applied on the poultry farm and the swine farms as if the market demands that. Obviously, this manual considers biosecurity.
For this assessment to happen, for Senacica to do the assessment on biosecurity, we talk about minimum measures. Why minimum? There should be maximum. Well, because we try to focus on strategic points. As I said in the beginning, 4 fundamental aspects to ensure there's adequate biosecurity: controlling entry, internal movement, controlling exits, and it's basically those. A good biosecurity program or assessment could go much beyond that. It could be more intensive. But we are talking about the minimum requirements to ensure there's good control and risk management. So in this case, for us to go to a farm and assess this, the owner has to request Senacica to come. They have to say they're interested in having our official authority go to the farm and evaluate their minimum safety measures or security measures. Then we have a veterinarian go to the farm to start the evaluation, looking at all biosecurity measures that have been implemented. We have a form for this. I will show it later on. And so the veterinarian has to document evidence and to take pictures to ensure that they are following all these biosecurity measures. Afterwards, that same veterinarian has to fill out a survey, which includes photographic evidence and also documentary evidence of what they have seen. Each evaluation we perform leads to a file. And so we have all documentation of anything observed at that farm. If the farm has or meets the requirements, then we can provide a biosecurity certificate if it's positive. If it's negative, there's a letter written to the owner listing all the points that they have weaknesses in and the reasons why they cannot receive the certificate. They will have to correct these measures to ensure they can get the certificate. The form we have is this one. It's quite basic. So it looks at very strategic points, and we do not add a percentage for each of the fields. The assessment is quite straightforward. It's just yes or no. Meets the requirement, yes or no? Because if there's any kind of failure in the facility, then it's just not being met. So for example, disinfecting vehicles, if they have the sanitary arch, but the sprayers are not working properly or completely, even if they have the assembly there, that it would not be compliant. For biosecurity to be there, it should be fully compliant. So looking at all the necessary measures and then, if necessary, adding what they should do to correct them if they have not received the certificate. Once they have corrected that, then there's a reassessment. They have to request it again for us to visit again and finally be able to complete the procedure and provide the certificate. In each visit, the veterinarian has to, of course, follow the protocols established by the farm itself. And of course, they should not have been in any farms the previous week. Of the points I've mentioned, now looking at the specifics, I'd like to give some examples of the things we measure and the things we find. So first, as for infrastructure, the form includes verification that the farm is not near other types of swine farms, slaughterhouses, main roads, or anything that can lead to the spread of disease. That's important. If they have a perimeter fence or some kind of a gate to control entry. So when we are assessing, we always try to ensure that the whole farm meets the requirements. So not just the front of the farm, because many times you see when you go to do the assessment, the farm knows you will be there, so they try to change things on the go, but it would not be enough. We have to ensure, for example, that for the fence, it is covering the entire perimeter and not just one area. And it's not something that we should impose. The producers should understand the benefit for them. Now, we also check for that fence to be intact, that entry to the farm is also effectively controlled. We see two photographs, one that is meeting the requirements, a gate that is well built. But then on the other photograph, we see a production unit where you have an entryway to the farm, but it's more of a makeshift fence. It's not really in good condition. It does have an entry gate, but it doesn't fully comply with all the security measures. There should be no space for anyone to enter around that gate. It could be an animal, a person, and there should be a way to avoid anyone entering the production unit. So this would be an observation, and then the producer would be told to improve that. Some other pictures I have here, they should prohibit entry of people that are not working in the farm. We don't have a mechanism like the one we saw in the first presentation, but at least the farm should be identified clearly and any access is controlled, closed off. There should be signs clearly stating and making it evident that access is forbidden and that people cannot enter freely. We see again two photographs, one that is correctly closed with clear signage and not allowing entry. It's a very small door that would only allow one person to enter at any point. Again, looking at all the signs telling you that you cannot enter if you're unauthorized. On the other side, we see a farm that has an access gate, but it is always open. There's no form of effective control to see who is coming in or going out, and then it means this farm is vulnerable for any vehicle to enter or anyone that is not protected to enter. So these are the types of things we really assess when we're evaluating. Then there's the logbook, and here again, common sense is very important. When we go to perform an assessment, we always look at the evidence we have for access control, which are the logbooks. These are some pictures of them. We have to truly verify that they are being filled out as they should. I have two pictures here because these are two different farms where you see one with a logbook. Of course, they're both manual, they're manual records, but for the first one, we see a book. It's been used, it's clearly following a certain order. You see signatures of people that have come in and gone out, anyone entering the farm. And then the other photograph, we see there is also a way to record entries, but the logbook is almost brand new. It does have some records already, but it's very well preserved, and so that raises questions to see whether they are truly registering everyone that is entering the farm. Also, that book is not really reliable because again, it looks brand new and you can see it's almost the same handwriting throughout. And of course, that type of deceit is not tricking us. It's only going to be negative for the company because they won't be able to trace all the people that have entered their farm and who might be a risk factor. So we would highlight that type of problem. Another important part is training. This has to be specifically for employees, for the workers that are in constant contact with the animals, that are caring for the animals, and anyone that comes and goes from the farm. The training should not just be for a veterinarian or for very specific people. It should be for all the staff, especially those working directly in the farm. Everyone should be trained and aware of all the biosecurity measures. They should understand why they have to perform each of these and why they have to follow the biosecurity protocols. When we do our evaluation visits, we always ensure that we interact and have contact with workers at the farm to ask them how the procedures are performed at the farm. And there we can see whether these protocols are being followed. We also see whether the staff is being trained, because when we go to the visit, of course, we won't be part of the training, but it's evident that if there has been training, that, well, there could be some form of documentary evidence that they have done the training. and whatever we can have access to, but we always try to verify by asking workers, have you received training? And of course, just by seeing them apply the biosecurity measures, we know. As for disinfection, we have to verify again that everything is working. So in this case, we see the sanitary arch that sprays disinfectant. If it's not all working correctly, the farm would not receive a check or a compliance. We also have to look at the types of disinfectants they use, that they are using them correctly, that there's a record in case the people entering the farm and understand, but also during the visit. And of course, that all the areas have specific disinfection measures before entering. So we have to verify that each of these measures are being met. You have the arch, it works properly. There's a good disinfection of vehicles inside. And we also see when we go to one of the enclosures that they do have a basin where you would use it to wash your feet, but it's not really being used because it's dirty and it doesn't have any disinfectant inside it. The area of cargo load and unload should also be correctly kept. Here we see that it's located right beside an enclosure and it should be far away because this would be a risk if it's too close by. Unless you have vehicles transporting animals up to an endpoint where there would be no interaction with other vehicles or vehicles that are not strictly farm vehicles. The health module, we try to ensure they have a good sanitation, that they have the dirty area, gray area, and the clean area, where people have enough clothing available to use in the farm and that everything is clean. When we do our assessments, we have to verify that these are being used correctly. There have been some events where you have the facility correctly prepared, but you might have problems with water heaters not working. And of course, in some parts of Mexico, it gets very cold, and in very cold weather, if the staff does not have hot water, they will not take a bath or a shower. So we have to ensure that is working and that everyone is performing their cleanup or their shower. There should also be ways to avoid other animals or vermin entering and any wildlife. So when we go to the assessment, we have to ensure that each of the enclosures is intact, that there's some kind of netting or meshing to avoid birds or other animals from entering, because this could be a risk for the pork. We also verify that the warehouses for any material, equipment are correctly closed off and clean. This is very important, and there could be some contamination of products or chemicals used if they are not properly kept or washed. A warehouse should have everything correctly labeled, organized, and medications, biologicals, everything should be well kept, labeled, and that's an important part of the evaluation as well. The feeding silos and warehouses should have a closed off system. As we see in the pictures, they are appropriate. There is one, though, that is always open. That, again, may lead to feed contamination. Pests could also enter, and obviously that is a risk for the farm. Water should also be clean. There should be always an assessment of the water supply, the water that will be used for swine, but also for cleaning and disinfecting. If there's hard water, for example, that could lead to less effectiveness of certain disinfectants. And just for cleaning with the general detergents. So there should be studies done, physical, chemical, and microbiological studies of water frequently, at least every 3 months, to ensure the water supply is of quality. How to dispose of waste and other organic material. They can have crematoriums. This could be under also composting or interment, but mostly there are mortality pits that should be covered adequately. There should be no access for wildlife or others. And obviously, there should be appropriate waste management and appropriate handling of mortality. At this point, when we go supervise how dead animals are disposed of, they should be appropriate. And we have had some issues where we don't necessarily see how they are doing it, but we still have to verify how. So if we don't see anything directly, we ask workers how they dispose of any dead animals. And that generally gives us the information we need. As for dangerous animals, we know that vermin and rodents can transmit several types of diseases. So we have to ensure we have good controls of these types of animals. So we have to also ensure that if you're using poison, we have to verify how and where it is being added. It should not be a makeshift manner. It should be properly enclosed, and the poison should be included and used correctly to get rid of harmful animals. There's also other types of species, such as flies and some birds, also have to be controlled. Cleaning and disinfection, if we cannot verify it directly at our visit, we should be shown evidence that this is being performed. The veterinarian that goes has to ensure that the farm documents how they clean and disinfect areas. And there should be evidence that this is being done constantly. Some of the pictures show a correctly disinfected facility. Then we see the outside of the enclosures constantly cleaned. But then we also see that although there was cleaning and disinfection performed, some floors are cracked, and there we cannot ensure they are properly disinfected. There might be tunnels and rodents using this, and which could lead to contamination. And outside, there's a lot of shrubbery, and that could lead to wildlife. Also, importantly, we have to ensure timely notification. Any suspicion of exotic diseases or any type of disease, lesions, have to be properly and quickly notified. There's passive and active surveillance. We have to have our reports. Any suspicion of exotic diseases should be reported. There's several ways they can do that. There's a mobile application that is downloaded by producers to their phone to help them quickly notify any suspicious activity. The app allows to add pictures of any pigs that have been affected. We also have an emergency number always available throughout the year. And we also have a program that promotes notification. Our veterinarians go to strategic areas such as pharmacies, animal markets, and other areas slaughterhouses and others to promote their use. We also have signage and labeling that is placed where we ensure that we have the telephone of the nearest veterinarian or coordinator and any other phone numbers and contact means. It's always important to raise awareness with producers that they should notify any suspicious of diseases in a timely manner. Now, the reasons we've found for farms not to follow biosecurity measures is first because there's no real obligation in terms of legislation to mandate producers to follow biosecurity measures. The highly technified companies do apply these measures, but there are other farms, the small scale farms and others that do not necessarily follow them. These are also mostly local market farms, and so there's great deficiencies in terms of biosecurity there. Another reason for farms not to apply biosecurity measures is that many times farms consider this an expense and not an investment. That, of course, is not true, but this is something they think about first of how much money they have to spend. And once you manage to explain the benefits they would get by having a good biosecurity program, they change their perspective. Also, training sometimes is seen as a waste of time because it's time workers could be using to perform farm activities. But training, of course, is very important for workers in a farm. Sometimes we teach them how to do things, but not why. You have to use this, you have to take a shower, but they don't really explain why. And so raising awareness is very important, having them understand that they have to apply each of these standards. The biosecurity measures is absolutely fundamental. Then there's also the fact that there's no supervision on many occasions by the staff responsible for biosecurity in the farm itself. If you have the standards and the protocols, but you don't supervise or ensure they are met, then it's not much use. As we saw in other presentations, it could be a few people that don't necessarily follow the measures, and sometimes you don't realize it, but then it could lead to problems. So it's important to supervise everyone is following the measures. And another reason is that the importance of biosecurity is underestimated, or people just don't know how important it is. We know it is important, but many times other people are not aware of this. Biosecurity has direct importance for food security and safety, preserving the environment, and sustainability of agriculture and livestock. That's why we always try to give that One Health approach. Biosecurity is a strategic, fundamental tool to prevent diseases. In Mexico, we understand the concept very well, especially in the poultry side. It has been a strategic tool to help us control outbreaks of different types of avian influenza. For swine production, we are using several strategies to prevent diseases, such as epidemiological surveillance. We do passive surveillance, and we also have strong training programs, awareness raising, lectures and courses at different sites, for example, slaughterhouses, to ensure timely detection. The numbers of reports and incidents increase every day. We have greater response by producers, by veterinarians in charge of farms and slaughterhouses. And now there is more timely report of any suspicion, mainly for classic swine fever, but also for African swine fever. And we have differential diagnostics for other diseases that are of importance to ensure we have a full view of what is happening in the country. Besides that, we also have a simulation in our sanitary intelligence unit, a simulation of the spread in case we have an outbreak of ASF according to our swine mobilization data. If we were to have an outbreak in one state or one municipality, how long it would take to have the disease spread throughout the country. With that, we can establish measures and take action at potential outbreak of ASF. So there's several activities we perform in Mexico. We also work on a program of intense surveillance, on-site surveillance in areas such as maritime ports that are high risk, where you have international vessels coming in. And so we have integrated measures to provide surveillance there. Also in Mexico, we have regionalization. If there's any problem or suspicion of ASF in the country, we try and ensure that we can provide help to specific high production areas in the country. So these are some of the actions we take in Mexico. And of course, biosecurity is a tool, a strategic tool, and we have to teach it as such so that we can prevent diseases that are of high risk for swine production. Thank you very much. And I am open to your questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Alcázar. Great presentation. I hope that everyone took note. With that, we can certainly go through our own evaluations of biosecurity measures in our own production systems. So thank you so much for your presentation. And now I would like to ask all the speakers to put their cameras on and be ready for our Q&A session. And I'd also like to invite Dr. Katia Martinez and Dr. Mario Peña to help us out in this session. So just to recap, we have received reports from participants on AICA, the Agricultural Institute of Colombia, section of San Andres. We have participants from Jamaica in this webinar as well. We've seen reports of the Ministry of Agriculture in Jamaica, the SAG Chile, which is their Agriculture and Livestock Service, in Bogota, Colombia, the agricultural sector. And so please feel free to keep reporting your country and institution in the chat box to see who has joined. For this Q&A section, I would now like to invite Dr. Katia and Dr. Mario to jump in. Feel free to provide your comments or add anything to any answer. Please feel free to do so. So the first question is for Dr. Piñeiro. What do you recommend to measure biosecurity in a country with many backyard farms and there's not enough resources to have an application such as the one you showed?
Okay, basically I understand there are no resources. That is very difficult to assume. That is what I like about digital transformation. It is very democratic for this purpose. It is more an attitude than an aptitude or having the resources. What we in general recommend, particularly in the concrete case you ask about, is that between not doing anything or try to do it all, there are many steps. First, there are no traditions. Records are, well, we have seen these in a notebook. No, they have to record something step by step, and they will begin to see changes either through this means or digital means, that they take one step in the right direction. And they must be monitored by, what have you, by someone responsible that knows them, that is their friend, that understands. And perhaps that person could suggest things they could improve. One of the most interesting things, I believe, in digital transformation is that this is a whole cultural shift. People are fundamental in all of this. I have seen, both in Europe as well as in other countries, that there is a significant gap between what we say we do and what we really do. a paper, a recent paper from the University of Gunter with a PhD thesis, saw what people were responding in surveys and what they measured through a system like this. Tremendous difference. The difference was up to a 40% difference. Just imagine. What we see it is not just the evil. Oh, I will cheat, and I do not want anybody to know I'm not doing the right thing. No, people just don't even remember. They know that in theory, but they forget. So if someone says, "I thought this sounds good, but okay, let us take a little step forward." A pilot project, 5, 10 small farms, but that they are interested in doing it, and that little bit that brings great satisfaction to them will urge them to take a second phase gradually. So when we change the way of doing things with a new technology, a new protocol, or whatever, even if it is very simple, it is important to have positive responses in the short term, that there be a reward. The doctor told me to do this or that, but I have only dedicated a few minutes to this. Well, that will not give good control. And it is different if they take a small step and see the results, and that will encourage a second step. Basically, we're changing inertia. So that is my suggestion. Doing things will work. And that they ask us whoever they consider appropriate, but at least take that first step. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, they have been asking for your contact information, so they will be in touch with you. I wonder whether there are other comments regarding what other speakers have to say, or Katia, regarding this question in particular.
¿Cómo estás, Erika?
Hello, how are you, Erika? Oh, thank you, Mario. Well, listen.
Mencionar que esto que Carlos estaba ahora hace un rato comentando,
Carlos was mentioning a while ago,
precisamente el costo de lo que puede
was mentioning the
este tipo
cost
de herramientas.
of certain
Clave el tema de
tools.
lo que él menciona de que no
It is
necesariamente toda
fundamental
innovación
to hear
es
what he said.
imposible de suceder.
Not are
Y
these
esto es muy
economically
importante porque las
impossible.
ventajas
And this is
de
very
este
important
tipo de
because the
herramientas
the
para
advantages of
poder hacer
such tools
análisis, para poder
for
tomar decisiones rápidas,
analysis and for
muchas veces
quick decision
el costo que
making,
puede implicar
oftentimes
el
the
aplicar este tipo
cost
de herramientas
of
rápidamente se ve
applying
reflejado
such
en
tool
una
is
incremental
quickly
reducción de
made up
tiempo,
for
más rápido,
because that will help you
reduciendo la
make
enfermedad,
faster decisions, more
mejorando
timely
recursos para
decisions, and how to better focus resources to address a possible
esto es muy
outbreak, for
importante
example.
tenerlo en cuenta porque
So this is very important to consider
sí o sí
because
los países tienen que empezar a
the
sopesar
countries need
dentro
to
de lo que
weigh
deben hacer
this
en su
as part
preparación
of
ante una
what they
emergencia
should
sanitaria.
do
No hablemos de que esta pandemia
in
va a pasar,
preparing for
para que esto lo
any
podamos tener
disease.
siempre presente.
They
¿Qué
must
crees
bear
tú de
that
pronto,
in
Carlos,
mind. Now,
que en
I have
parte
a
va
question to
permitiendo
Carlos, very much down those
poderse,
lines.
aunque bien estamos hablando de un tema de bioseguridad,
Although we're not talking necessarily about
para
biosecurity
esta
here,
porcina
but
africana,
for
un
African
tema de
swine fever,
detección temprana de brotes
the
es
early
muy importante,
detection of
es muy
outbreaks
importante
is
para nosotros
very,
porque
very
más
important.
rápido se pueda
Very
detectar
important because the
y más
sooner
rápido
we
se
can
pueda tomar
detect it, the
seguramente va a
faster
ser
we can take
la
action.
enfermedad mucho más rápido. Y en ese sentido la pregunta va para
So
Carlos
in this
pensando
question, in this
precisamente
sense, the question for
en
Carlos
la
is basically
facilidad y
thinking
ventajas
about
que tiene la digitalización
the
sobre el tema
facility
de la
that
digitalización
digitalization
de
brings,
la visión
and that is
sindrómica.
early
Se ha
warning,
venido
the
trabajando
syndromic
mucho en porcinovirus
detection.
específicamente para
Uh,
con virus del PIRS.
This has
En ese
been
sentido,
used
también
for
en Estados
other
Unidos se ha venido trabajando
outbreaks.
con este tipo
In the United States, they have
para
working on this
enfermedades como la peste porcina
syndromic
africana,
detection
en donde
in African
básicamente
swine fever, among
se
others. But
establece un
basically,
ranking
what they
de
do
los
is
síntomas que
develop
puede tener
a
esta
ranking
enfermedad,
of
por ejemplo, que puede
symptoms.
presentar, no hablando de los síntomas
I'm not
clínicos
talking about
del libro,
the
porque es que para
some
estas cepas de
symptoms
peste porcina
because
africana
some
se puede
African
presentar
swine
también
fever
una
strains
deficiencia secundaria.
are
Entonces,
appearing
más o menos
differently than
experiencias
they
en
had in the
Europa,
past.
donde se ha
So
tenido una
there
enfermedad
are
con este tipo de
experiences in
dispositivos.
Europe,
Y la pregunta
for
va es,
example. So my
¿qué tipo de
question is,
tecnología con este tipo de dispositivos, con
with
este tipo de
these type of
herramientas, poder
devices,
aplicar
for
un tema de
example,
vigilancia sindrómica en el que
could we
en
have
un
a
ranking
syndromic
de los
or as a syndrome surveillance program, and to report this perhaps weekly to allow faster reaction. A very relevant question, Mario, because the answer is a huge yes. Clearly, with technology nowadays and with the way of applying it, it has been very difficult for us to learn. But if we can get this operating in-house, that would be a big step forward. When we design something, we consider the individuals because, I mean, this is something that whoever has a WhatsApp, they can use the system. So immediately the person that reports can basically use a certain classification or ranking system and just send the report immediately to someone at the ministry or the official authority and immediately report this case. There are so many people that can take part in this. And these are people that already have Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. So let us get them involved in this other system to help. I used to see myself as a veterinarian when I said, okay, I go to the farms when I go to the farm, period. Or I ask my friends that are there. But the person that is with the animals day and night and that understands these animals, even when they are sad, that is the person that needs the training. Minimum, at least, but the more the better. If you see that the tip of the ears show such and such, things that they should keep an eye on. And the minimum difference, they should report it immediately. And there's a very curious effect here. We are examining the behavior of individuals also. When we people feel we are being monitored as part of a system, we tend to behave much better because there's someone keeping an eye on you, and if you get off track, they might complain or react, and this can have a positive reaction after all. So a simple system that, just as Dr. Gonzalez said, the hemorrhagic diseases, the famous red diseases as they are called. This is something very simple to do. Perhaps the best thing you could do in line with the other question. If someone wants to test it, well, I would not say go for a big scale. No, test it on a small scale to understand it, the professionals, the directors, the people out on the field, and see if that will help them. And if it helps, well, then we can see how to expand it. I, as a veterinarian, am fascinated with what technology can help us do, make us be better professionals, better veterinarians, and reach 500 farms from my office, and I will see what so-and-so is saying and what I should respond. So directly in response to your question, Mario, WhatsApp is the ideal thing. Sure, no doubt. Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you, Mario. Let us move to the next question for Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Alcázar. Should we include measuring biosecurity in the surveillance plans, and how can the official sector collaborate with the backyard or small producers and their operations? Well, I will start, excuse me, and then Dr. Alcázar. Okay. The surveillance system are really not specific plans to detect or demonstrate absence or presence. Basically, this is something that adds to the surveillance, but it is really not a surveillance plan in itself. In Chile, as as we mentioned a few weeks ago, there is a surveillance plan, a survey, a survey we applied. There was a survey that was launched for the commercial farms, 4,900 facilities, and we have learned so much over time and how things have evolved. There we also have this same type of survey for the small operations as well as the larger operations. So this has been very interesting to see the collaboration, particularly in rural areas. In countries, we have institutions of the Ministry of Agriculture that foster development. INDAP is the name of it in Chile. We work with them. We established the biosecurity measures, and we ensure that the funds transferred for that include basically to make improvements, building the enclosures for swine and training on how to handle feed, for example. That is what I could add for the time being, Dr. Erica. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Dr. Alcazar.
No sé si el doctor Alcázar.
No, I do not see Dr. Alcázar.
Sí, yo creo
Right, the image is frozen. Yes, he seems to be thinking.
Vamos a darle un chancecito a ver
Well,
si
let us give him a chance to see if he can reconnect. I wonder whether there's anyone that would like to add anything. Go ahead, Mario, and then Dr. Piñeiro. Thank you, Erica. More than add, I would like to understand a bit from the Chilean perspective and obviously the Mexican perspective.
For
us that have had the opportunity to work in the field in biosecurity, we see there are very organized facilities that could have the best biosecurity conditions required. And unfortunately, there's a psychological biosecurity impression where they say, okay, we have implemented everything, and we have peace of mind, but nothing is going to happen to us. They have the disinfection tunnels, the spraying tunnels, the staff, everything that is involved in biosecurity. But when we come across the entry of diseases, they have no idea of how the disease entered. That is one weak point. We have seen the failure in their internal biosecurity audits, not the audits by the veterinary services. No. This is internal, in-house biosecurity audits. And in that sense, we need the companies to mainstream the importance of biosecurity for their own self-control purposes. They must check their own in-house audits. And in Chile, the way they have been working on the internal training of people at the farms themselves, and they have been able to develop specific control programs, because in the end, biosecurity is not necessarily the responsibility of Senacica or the larger institutions. No, it is up to each farm owner. And I would like to know if there are any experiences in that sense. This will take us to another question for Mario. Let Dr. Alcázar respond the first question, and perhaps he can respond the second question, and we will offer the floor to Álvaro and then Dr. Piñeiro. Yes, thank you. As to surveillance plans, well, definitely. In Mexico, our surveillance plans are based on early detection. And the other part is continuous training, particularly the veterinary doctors and the companies. There is continuous training also for backyard operations. It is complicated, certainly, to say that backyard biosecurity will be 100% perfect. We know that any little bit that is done is a big benefit, but it is complicated to work in these backyard operations. We must remember that some of these backyard operations only are only active for a certain part of the year, so we are unable to provide the training year round. We must focus. Sometimes we focus then on larger scale activities. But we must ensure there is significant training on biosecurity. It is also important to mention that the state governments are very much involved in this also, and they foster biosecurity, providing certain inputs and materials that will support activities, for example, for the surroundings and put hedges around certain areas to avoid movement of cattle and animals. And something that Dr. Mario said is that we must ensure the training of the workers. One obstacle we could mention is that oftentimes the owners are the ones that have to create that awareness among their workers. When we go offer these courses to ensure that the staff is updated in biosecurity, what we detected is that basically the workers, the farm workers are the ones that are present, but not necessarily the owners. And that is an area that needs improvement. Veterinary doctors obviously want to improve biosecurity and knowledge, but it really does not depend necessarily on them, but instead on who all take those courses or who all participate in those training courses, including the owners, so that they can ensure this flows appropriately. Everyone must be aware of what biosecurity means and what it involves. And then we can ensure we can implement biosecurity in a combined manner at all levels to be much more positive. The first benefit basically is for the producer. And all we do is go along with them. We are their companions, offering that training and monitoring and verifying that what they are doing is being recorded. And that will help us measure biosecurity. But the main winner in all of this is the producer himself, the owner. And now with poultry, for example, when we said it was mandatory for farms to have this official biosecurity verification program, well, if they did not participate in the program and kept no records, well, they were considered to not be allowed to export. So or to trade their products. So that took to a series of very positive steps. And now there is a greater control over the pathogens and reporting of pathogens when these are detected. And when we turn this information into numbers for the growers, then they are much more open to better participate in biosecurity efforts. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Alcázar. Dr. González. Yes, thank you for the question. We have two mechanisms. One is SAC has a program for animals under control. These are all establishments or farms that export animals are under the responsibility of a veterinary doctor. There is oversight, and that is official approval. And then there is training both for the industrial sector as to the backyard operations, and public-private partnership with Procede in this case is very important for different operations in areas of risk in the country and risk communication. All of this is funded by the industry itself. This as a service allows us to provide training in different areas where we give them a cup of coffee and a little sandwich for the participants, and the larger companies that have their in-house training. SAC officers are invited also as speakers when they provide training courses to ensure this and strengthen this private-public partnership and communication. Thank you, Alvaro. Dr. Piñeiro, please. Well, very briefly, and what line with what the doctors have said is one thing I like very much is go a step beyond. This allows database training, not just actual training like we have been doing over the years. That has to be done. We must remember all of this. But when you all have that, all the data, and I see Dr. Gonzalez agrees with me, but when we say, okay, out of these 8 things, we will focus on these 2 that people are not as much aware of. And then data will tell us if that training has been good. So we create a virtuous circle. This is part of this work, this change in work culture. And another important point is that what we are talking about right now here, when we're talking about objective data in biosecurity, is that we have been developing a first database, but biosecurity really means nothing if it does not become something. Better production, fewer outbreaks, fewer positive PCRs, all these indicators. So now what we are beginning to do is that each of these databases, the one on biosecurity, the prevalence and incidence of diseases, mortality. So when you begin to match all of this information with other data, well, you say, okay, those that are we are saying, okay, for example, that diarrhea cases have dropped 40%, and we are only using 20% more antibiotics. These are things that, like Dr. Alcázar was saying, the financial part is so important for this. So this is a very good argument for that the director, the owner, whoever says this is not just something that sounds pretty or that we have a written regulation. No, they are seeing the outcomes with a significant return. So this is very important to consider, because if we wait too long, everything will be too diluted. Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. For time reasons, we have one last question for all panelists, because we are tight time-wise. Basically, we have been scolded already. Last question for all panelists. You spoke here about biosecurity at ports and airports. Now this question is aimed at this. How can we measure biosecurity at ports and airports to control the risk of contaminated products with African swine fever entering or exiting? That basically can apply to any type of contaminated product. So, Dr. Gonzalez, I see that big smile on your face. Oh, I can tell you are really interested in answering first. Oh, yes. Allow me to try to support the work by Dr. Alcázar. The first record we have is confiscations, interceptions. If we can develop a risk map where the points of risk is precisely based on the confiscation of processed meats, and you can use the data also with the number of passengers, means of transportation, and we can set parameters. Chile has a very strong process in that sense to quantify and thus determine how many X-ray machines are needed, et cetera, and where. Additionally, we have a profiling a system for the flights. A flight coming from the Dominican Republic will have a different level of attention as compared to someone coming from Bolivia, for example. So we have the interception at the points of risk help us measure and quantify the risk of entry. These are the measures Chile uses to control and prevent diseases. Thank you, Álvaro. Dr. Alcázar, and then Dr. Piñero. Well, definitely, to talk about biosecurity, everything that can enter requires carrying records. If we want to evaluate it as a farm, we could say that our country and all corner or border crossings are points of control. So we need to have sufficient infrastructure to monitor this. In Mexico, we have a specific director in charge of inspection. If you visit Mexico, you would see the infrastructure we have basically is to dispose of wastes, and basically we have a canine school also. And the objective of this is to train the canines that will play an important role in basically detecting luggage. And we want to have this type of strategy at the major borders. We have set up a series of kilns also to dispose of confiscated products. As Dr. Álvaro was saying, we need to measure the risk. And the countries they come from. So in this, we have a series of requirements to ensure that what comes in legally to the country it has the certainty it will not be a risk. And when we're talking about live animals, well, we ensure they go to quarantine as appropriate, and this will we verify then that these represent no risk. So to measure biosecurity, we need to act, as Dr. Álvaro said, having the infrastructure. If we do not have this infrastructure and the trained staff, very unlikely will we be able to say we have good biosecurity system. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Alcázar. Go ahead, Dr. Piñero. Well, in ending, we're on the right track. there's very few people that are as data-centric as I am. If we develop a well-classified database, we are starting to apply this. I believe we should use some of the algorithms, both supervised as well as unsupervised model, particularly those that have to do with reducing grouping, because these algorithms, when you just leave them loose there, they can find patterns that go beyond our brain. For example, our mind, well, when the flight goes through a storm and it has had to stop twice, the possibility of a dog detecting XY sandwich is multiplied by 3. These are things that people do not think of very often. And perhaps if they had that information, they would have to double the effort of inspecting flights that perhaps were not as suspicious in the first case. So we must use our human intelligence. That is all. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Piñero. Mario, go ahead.
Gracias, Erika. Simplemente para terminar
Thank
mi
you,
comentario,
Erika. Just
lo que
to
ustedes
finish up a
todos lo que están
comment,
mencionando es supremamente importante,
everything we've heard is
pero no
extremely
solamente la
important,
gestión de cómo se encuentran
but
o cómo se hacen
we
los
should not
documentos,
just
sino
think
qué
of
va a pasar con
how
los
to
documentos.
seize
Y
products, but
aquí
what will
vuelvo al
happen with
tema,
seized
al tema de
products.
auditoría,
And again, we
y la
go
revisión,
to
inspección, porque es muy
supervision,
importante saber que las
surveillance,
facturas aéreas,
because it's
estos
important to
documentos
know
finales,
what to
van a
happen,
determinar
what
si
will
efectivamente son de
happen,
manera
how these will
adecuada,
be disposed of in the end,
digamos, la gestión que tiene el aeropuerto
how the
de la
airport
autoridad veterinaria es la
or the
adecuada del
veterinary
recurso que todos lo tenemos que
authority
hacer.
uh,
Y siendo
ensures their
realistas con los
disposal,
programas
whether they comply
latinoamericanos,
with everything. And if we
precisamente
look
porque
at it
como
in reality in
como
our
lo
Latin
decía
American
Carlos,
countries,
el
as we
poder a
heard
partir
from
de la
Carlos,
data establecer
we
zonas de
have
riesgo
to
alrededor
be
del
able
aeropuerto,
to
porque
establish risk
desafortunadamente nuestros
areas
países,
around
no
airports
todos somos
based
tan
on
precisos
data.
como deberíamos
Unfortunately,
ser,
in not
y acá el
all our
tema de
countries, we
identificar
are
esos riesgos
very aware
es
of
muy
what we should
importante
do.
a
And if we're
partir
talking about
precisamente
risk-based
de esa
surveillance,
data que
this will
controla
be very important. And it depends on the data we can have.
Excelente, Mario.
Yes, Mario. Wonderful.
Quisiera seguir preguntándoles, pero no
I
puedo.
would love to
Pero
continue asking questions, but
no sé si hay algún
unfortunately,
comentario final,
we
Katia,
can't really.
para
But
ir
do we
cerrando.
have any closing
Ha
comments,
sido
Katia, so that we can
excelente su
close this session?
intervención.
It has been a wonderful webinar, great interventions. I think it's not just excellent work that we've seen, but it's wonderful to see how they've really complemented each other and what we're looking for from international organizations, how to help each of the countries that are receiving this information we share. The previous webinar we had was related to just national regulations and what had been implemented in different countries. With this one, we are taking it to see what each country does in terms of biosecurity. And that's why we like it so much when we can share different opinions, experience from other regions compared to our own region and how we are progressing. We know that everyone has their different level of progress, but all these are tools that can help us to progress towards improving our biosecurity, building capacity in biosecurity. I think that what Carlos shared, Carlos Piñero, what he shared from Spain and the experience in Europe and technology that's available for all countries and that he has also made available for information exchange with our countries. It's a great way to add and complement to what we've heard from Carlos from Mexico and Alvaro from Chile, what they're already executing in their own countries to ensure we have statistics and data. So I believe that we've reached the goals we wanted in these webinars, and we are very thankful for each of our speakers and everyone that has joined us from the different organizations. You've all been very willing to share information to ensure our whole region benefits from your experience. Thank you so much from WOA and all the other organizations that are participating for your lectures. Have a good afternoon. Thank you, Katia. Mario, would you like to close before we say goodbye? Go
Muchas
ahead.
gracias. No, simplemente agradecerles.
I just want to thank
Todas las
everyone
palabras de Katia,
and
en el
echoing
sentido de que
Katia's
creo que
words.
cumplimos el objetivo
I think we
del
have met
webinar.
the goals of the
Me siento muy
webinars.
contento porque
I feel very
realmente
pleased
esto que queríamos, que estamos buscando,
because
lo hicieron muy
that
bien
is what
ustedes.
we
Muchísimas
wanted.
gracias por
We've
por
heard
esta
wonderful
colaboración. Qué bueno volverlos a ver. Y bueno,
presentations
un
by
abrazo
all
para todos y
speakers, and
hasta
it's also
luego.
great to see you again. So have a great day. Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you all. From our interagency group, we had 3 wonderful presentations and great interventions and answers to questions. This discussion is always where we see how all participants are so interested. As you've seen in webinars, we have participants from official sectors, from academia. There's also people from the private sector. So we reach several different levels, and we thank you all so much. Just an announcement. Be sure to follow us and to be here for the next webinar at the end of October, and it's zoning. It's on zoning. So hopefully you will be able to participate in that one as well. And we hope to be able to continue inviting Dr. Piñero, Dr. Gonzalez, and Dr. Alcázar. Hopefully it's not the last time we see them. And thank you so very much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Thank you all.
Hasta luego,
Thank you.
un abrazo a todos.
Thanks, everyone.